Hello, I'm Erica Harman, Manager of Archives and Records at Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site. Although I'm an archivist, a person who takes care of and makes available historic records and documents, I also care for the historic site's collection of objects. Some of the most striking objects in our collection are handmade model ships. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of model ships that were made by people incarcerated inside the building. The history of model ships at Eastern State Penitentiary goes back to at least the late 19th century. In this photograph from the 1890s, you can see two men in a cell making shoes. However, it's not the two people or their activity I'd like you to pay attention to. Behind the man on the right, you can see a model ship. We don't know if the incarcerated people were making ships at that time or if they were just using them for decoration. You may notice other decorative items in the cell, such as pictures hanging on the walls. In 1916, a prisoner-published newsletter included an article praising the accurate and fully rigged model ship made by Henry Berggren, prisoner number B7401. Several later articles in the same newsletter mentioned model ships and boats for sale. In the 1920s, model shipmaking really launched, into the big time. The gentleman shown here was Lewis Edwards, prisoner number C1699. Edwards was part of a prison escape in 1923 and made it all the way to Honolulu, Hawaii before he was recaptured. On his way back to Philadelphia by ship, Edwards began making model ships based on a magazine article he had read. When he reached Eastern State Penitentiary, he was permitted to create a model shipbuilding business that employed dozens of people incarcerated there. By the late 1950s and 60s, the model ships were still being produced at Eastern State Penitentiary. In this photograph, you can see several shelves full of model sailing ships, as well as more modern naval crafts. These ships were often given as gifts to friends and family. Some were donated to Philadelphia children's hospitals at holidays. Many were also sold. People living in the neighborhood could purchase prisoner-made items in the front gate area. In this photograph, we can see a small case of crafts that were for sale inside the gate. Items very similar to those in the case are also part of the historic site's collection today. Here's an example of a wooden boxer dog wearing boxing gloves. And here is another example of a carved dog in our collection that looks similar to one in the case. The carved dogs are small enough to hold in one or two hands. Obviously, there's not enough room in this case for the model ships, which are much larger. I imagine that if someone wanted to buy one, it would need to be brought out as needed. There was also a bar in the Fairmount neighborhood that acted as a retailer for the ships. Because there were so many ships made, several of them have survived the years and made it into the historic site's collection. In this photo, you can see the view of the south wall of our collection space. You can imagine that in person, the row of model ships is quite striking, and you can only see a few of them in this photograph. We have 16. This ship has a small tag at the base that reads Old Original Bookbinders Fishing Yawl 1865. The donor told us that his parents purchased the ship from the local bar, named Bookbinders, as a gift for him before the prison closed. This small wooden ship belonged to Dr. Samuel Leopold, who was a prominent Philadelphia psychiatrist. Dr. Leopold worked with people incarcerated at Eastern State Penitentiary. He kept this ship in his home's entryway until he passed away. His granddaughter inherited it and donated it to the Eastern State Historic Site in 2017. Here's another ship that belonged to Dr. Leopold that is labeled as being a replica of the Mayflower. You may notice the electric cord trailing behind the ship. Some of the ships were also nightlights or clocks. This one was a nightlight. Most of the model ships in our collection have deteriorated over the years. This is particularly evident in the rigging, which is delicate and tends to tear. This model of the Essex is in particularly good condition because for most of its life, it has remained in a glass case. Here is another view of the Essex on a shelf. I hope you can see the relatively good condition the rigging is in. Eastern State's collection only contains sailing vessels. However, we have visited some models on display at the Independence Seaport Museum that were made in the penitentiary. Maybe one day someone will add a ship like those to our collection. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the history of model ship making at Eastern State Penitentiary and getting to see a few examples of these beautiful items in our collection. Please visit us again soon.